Hi, everybody.
Yeah, hi everyone. Becky will just start. We're discussing bridging gender gaps, what women have to say. So I'll hand over to Becky to
Hi. So the first session was really nice and very had a lot of great information, and I like that it was a relaxed environment and we get to share our views in a very, very accommodating way. And so for those who are attending this second session, just relax. Like Togobi said in the first session, this is a safe space. You are free to air your views without fear of being shut down. And if you do put your foot in your mouth, we will tell you you did and we would laugh about it. We are not going to attack you for it. Yeah, so feel free, relax. And we have Yomi, Christian, and Alicia as speakers. And we will just be talking about what men has to say when it comes to when it comes to gender gaps. So, I love research because part of what I do is also research. And before I call on, I think I would just go alphabetically from the back and start with Yomi. So, so before I do that, I just want to also give a little background. In Canada, research has shown that women are often better educated than men, and that 55% of women are more likely to obtain a tertiary education when compared with just 46% of men. Despite this fact, the gender gap in employment has still not been bridged. In fact, it has decreased by 9% over the past 20 years. However, women are still less likely to climb the career ladder and are twice as likely to work part-time when compared with men. And also women in full-time jobs in Canada earn on the average 19% less than their male counterparts. And that one report even said that in 20, the report in 2019, it concludes that if this trend continues, it would take Canada 164 years to close the gender economic gap between men and women. I hope that's a great conversation starter. So, Yomi, I just want to hear your views on the topic. Just nothing. What do you have to say? Yeah.
Wow, it's very, very interesting when it comes to gender gap, and most times the way the data is being presented sometimes, and looking from the Canadian point of view, and once we look at the Western world, which is mostly predominantly consumerism kind of society, most goods are being portrayed with a lot of gender gap. Like if you want to go for like a vacation, for example, like there's this gender appeal that kind of come, and what I would kind of say with the kind of data out there, it's like most women tend to get most of the base job, but when it's time to climb a bit further, discrimination starts to creep in based on gender, which is quite subtle. And those come with like women trying to become CEOs, executives, which creates a problem in the society. So one thing we have seen so far, that men themselves they have got a lot to play in bridging this gap. And one way I feel that those kind of gaps can be bridged is actually in policy settings. There are some there are some of these gaps like we don't see as a problem, but really on the long term, the way Becky said that it will take years for Canada to catch up. And secondly, when we talk about gender gap, sometimes we look at the social and cultural perspective. So like culturally and so socially, women are meant to go into a kind of certain career path, which might which most people might consider like, okay, this is a woman's job, this is a man's job. See, for example, now in the automobile industry, very few females are in that kind of industry, which accounts for so much in Canada. Like most Canadian policy is being built surrounding the automobile industry. And I think the government needs to create such kind of a policy that will enable women to partake so much in that field. So sometimes I think it's a kind of social construct that kind of widens that gap. And culturally for Canada still tends to favor gender equality, but this is province-based. In some provinces, like in Newfoundland or in rural Canada, from research, we still feel like women still maintain that traditional back row. So
yeah, thank you so much, Yomi, for that contribution. It is very important, like you said, that we pay attention to the cultural and social ingredients that might be adding to these gender gap, and maybe not adding positively. Gender perspectives, cultural and social perspectives that we need to kind of adjust or shift so that we can lessen or even eradicate this gap. Yeah, so thank you very much. I'm just going to move to Christian. And what do you have to say? And also, could you speak on, does it go both ways for gender gap? So just talk on the topic and also kind of let us know if it also goes both ways. If it could be women too are more on the one side and men are having feeling it on the other side and all of that. So does it go both ways? But just speak generally to the topic and kind of also speak on if it goes both ways.
Thank you, Becky. I want to get to that last question at the end, a little bit of how thinking about how do we approach this issue. And one of the first things I thought about was one of my favorite authors who really taught me a lot about how to think and speak courageously. David Whyte, he said, when you have an experience where something fundamentally changes you, what you need to do with that experience is have a courageous conversation. And a courageous conversation by definition is the one you're not having, the one that you're afraid to have, and the one that you fear the answers to. And so I want to approach this through not as right or wrong. I'll be very careful that I'm not representing all men. I can't. All I can represent is what I know and who I am. And where that base of knowledge came for me was working with Edmonton here, with men here in the Edmonton community. And so if we're going to start, I think, a conversation that's going to be, I hope, challenging, and I think that's how we grow as we take on these difficult conversations. I want to start with a little bit of the environment which shapes the men in my community. The city of Edmonton is located in one of the most largest populations and one of the most northern cities in the world. It has a unique culture. I'm not going to go through a big history of Alberta, but we need to sort of understand sort of the foundation of where these people's, when you talked before about privileges, where they come from. At the beginning, Alberta was a place where those who were rejected from the East came. We saw a lot of Ukrainian, Polish, German, Dutch, the non-wanted or the non-preferred Europeans come this way. And they settled here in very harsh and difficult land. Now, this idea of hard work and coming in to do this is sort of the foundation of what you think a lot of Albertans speak about themselves, how they identify themselves. Very interesting that it was after the Great Depression that the political idea of conservatism and the foundations of, I think, about Alberta thinking within the conservative values really came to be embedded in our community, which was we work hard, we work for ourselves, and we work for those opportunities. And then they have this sort of interesting consequence because it was usually a little bit more of a, say, communal socialist idea, and it went more to a rigid individualistic idea. And that value really started to stamp in place once the oil and gas industry became an economic engine of this community. Now, what the oil and gas did is it gave, and we're talking already about an era in which men and women, the laws and access were completely different, but it gave, I'm going to speak through the lens of men, an opportunity without education, without hard needing to go the long way about gaining wealth, an opportunity in access to wealth, which started to really found what they thought politically and socially. And with as much money Alberta's had, and we talk about how much money we put into social issues, but really in proportion to what we make, we really don't. It's more about you make it on your own. And that value has been proven over and over again politically. So as, again, we start to found sort of what Edmonton is today has really been based on a lot of opportunities. And we had a lot of migration into this community. And I'm not just talking about immigration, I'm talking about migration from Canada. When people were struggling in other parts of Canada, men had an opportunity to come here and find work. It's very difficult work. It's environmentally distant. There's a lot of hardships that come with it, but opportunity. I think about Edmonton environment as well. It's not like Calgary, which has the mountains nearby. It's close to the border. It gets a little more Chinooks. It's got hills. It's beautiful. If I had to ask myself, why do people come to Edmonton? And the reality is, there's really not much here. I love this city, but the truth is, it's not because it's a pretty place to live. It's because the potential for economic growth and possibilities, it offers people a chance to wealth when other situations, perhaps there wasn't. Now, I recognize the economy is shifting and changing. And I want to talk a little bit about that, where I see how this question of privilege and where the question of how do we connect these issues to the issue of gender. And I think it fits here. I want to start again a little bit, I'm sorry for the history lesson, but I think it helps build sort of an understanding of who we are. And I want you to think from the perspective of the conservative Christian base that Alberta is. And I thought about this also when I was watching what's happening in the US. I thought it was a good explanation to this counter response to progression. First, there was women's suffrage, in which we had to adapt to the fact that we even see women as humans for a long time. Men, quite frankly, and I want to kind of take this perspective, when it doesn't affect you personally, you kind of have less of an investment. And so a lot of men felt this was not the way things were. We talked about the anti-war 1970s, the hippies, the counter-government sort of responses, started to get kind of socialist. And that was a very dirty word in this environment. We talked about affirmative action. When they recognized we had to create a change because the system of access for economic opportunity wasn't fair. We started to have the spectrum of gender and sexuality come out. We start to go through the question of immigration and racism and a lot of the things that were happening, and all of a sudden policies that were there to protect people who are vulnerable. There was the question of workplace sexual harassment and workplace safety. All of a sudden that really started to get ramped up. Started seeing things like, again, I'm loading a lot of things on purpose here. There was the question of bringing family violence to the forefront. Separation and divorce started to increase, and the courts no longer just judged with men. There was this shift of trying to look things through the context of the best interest of the children and family. And a lot of the courts have been siding, and I'm not picking a spot here, I'm just saying, with what women and access to the children and family dynamics and what that looked like. We looked at the environmental issues. All of a sudden, Alberta's dirty oil. All of a sudden, we need to make economic changes. We talk about the truth and reconciliation, trying to make right what we've done with our Indigenous community. And now we're talking about the economy and changing and potentially oil and gas no longer being that security that once was. And so when we look at the question of gender, particularly in this environment, from the lens of the men who have had all these privileges, they've been losing a lot of power, losing a lot of access and promises. Often when I think about America, it's more the American dream than any reality of capitalism. It's this idea that you can make it. And all of a sudden, without an education, without that access, all these men feel like all those possibilities are gone. At the heart, I think, of anything I've ever done when it comes to social work or working with people, I understand at the heart of this is grief and loss. And if we're looking from the perspective of what men who've had all these privileges have experienced, is a lot of losses. I don't think it's a fair comment. I don't think when you haven't experienced the world through what immigrants like my parents and many of us had to go through, what people of color have faced traditionally as far as racism and access, when we talk about women and being able to move up that corporation and getting access and see possibility, you're absolutely right. But when you come from the other lens, you look at this as a series of losses. And so there's pushback. And so what we've seen a lot when talking about gender is that we've started taking polarizing positions. Instead of saying, how's this good for society, or saying, how's this good for me? And so I think the first problem is that the very conversations about gender and gender issues is that we've gone to the same way that politics has gone lately, how social media has been drawing, how television media, whether you're Fox News or CNN, where are you in that spectrum? We stopped talking and we started focusing on who's right and who's wrong. And I think the great strides that women have made as far as what they've been doing, there's a good conversation saying is, how do we get further without men being part of the conversation? And I think they're absolutely right. But the problem is, I think we've gotten to a point where this right and wrong and this lens of not being able to communicate has become so conflictual that we haven't learned how to talk to each other about these issues. Instead, we pick a side. We're so determined to be right, we're not listening. And I think that's really what's starting to happen. And if we look at where our society is today, and I want to say this because this is important, democracy and this idea of civil liberties is not a given. This is an experiment. And as we experiment, we're trying to make corrections and we're trying to figure it out on the way there. And the challenges with the grievances of the past, how do we deal with the pain of the past, as well as try to move forward and heal from it and create something new? Especially when this new is difficult, it's insecure. I don't know what's going to mean to me in that dream and that family. The generations before me that had all those opportunities, I don't see that for myself. And I think that's what's happening a lot in Alberta with Alberta men. When I first engage with them, they're often come from a place of talking about what they've lost, what they can't do, a lack of voice. I don't think this is solely on the changes. I mean, traditionally, I think male culture has been very insular. You stay with yourself. There's been less of a possibility to express one's emotions and ideas openly. We've kind of allowed more and I don't like the word toxic masculinity because I think it only describes certain behaviors. And we all have behaviors we don't like, but that doesn't mean all of me. But there are parts of being a man that have traditionally pushed us away from wanting to take a chance, to be vulnerable, to have these conversations with people who are struggling. And so for me, when I've been working with men in my community, I start there. I start where they are, and they're often hurting. And once you get past the hurt, once you're able to look beyond your own pain, the possibilities of conversations are endless. But I think what we need is not just to talk with the men, we need to find a bridge so that men and women, as we try to progress and make this new society better, we got to find a way for us to start talking. And it's not always going to be nice. And the reason it's not always going to be nice is because when we're hurting, we often come from a place of hurt. And hopefully it's unintentional. Most of the time when you're hurt, you tend to hurt others, whether it be with your words or dismissing other people's challenges and other people's pains. And we stop listening because we are hurting. And so I think that's where I personally think this conversation needs to go. It needs to go from a place where, how do we start to talk to each other rather than against each other? And I think the possibilities of moving forward and closing this gap are going to come from that. To bravely, to be courageous, to be willing to take on each other's differences. And then instead of seeing each other as this gender, see us as people. If we start talking to each other as people, I think, again, endless possibilities. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christian. And I really do appreciate your thoughts. These are your points of view. I must admit, what I have never even, like, I've considered them a bit because I have always worked with women and girls. And during the last part of my time in my former country, I began to look at boys and say, we have put so much attention on women and girls, but we are neglecting the boys. The boys are hurting. The boys are being are facing issues too. So you clearly articulated some of these issues around bringing in the historical, the political, the religious, the economic, and all these parts together to put it in proper perspective and saying that we have to have these conversations. We have to find the middle ground. There has to be accommodation for everyone that is coming to the table. The times are changing. So what do we do about people who are losing their sense of safety and opportunities? What do we do about men who are losing their sense of safety, how it used to be, and how the whole world is changing? How do we bring them to the table? And then what do we also do about the women who are also being marginalized, as Yomi said, being viewed through the lens of, oh, these are cultural and social rules for you. So it is actually more like a double burden. So we have to have these conversations, and I'm just grateful to TCLI that we are having this conversation. There has to be a starting point. So thank you so much for talking about the other side. So thank you. And now I'm going to move to Alicia. So I just also want to hear your point of view on the gender gap. What do you think and what are your thoughts? And also, could you also speak to, let's talk about roles in look at the economic angle too. I don't know if that's something you want to do. If you're not comfortable with that, you can as well let me know, and we can just take what you have. I just want to find out, should there be certain roles that women should not be naturally offered to because of their physique or physiology? And also the same, likewise, goes for men. Should there be roles in the society where you look at it and you're like, oh, it's more of a man thing? So just talk generally on the issue and then see if you can speak on this issue of, or if not, we can just throw it open.
Okay, thanks, Becky. I'm going to think on that one, the economic angles and roles. It's definitely in my home. We have like blue jobs and pink jobs, like man jobs and women jobs, whether we should or shouldn't, it just exists. So let me think about that one, and I'll get back to, I'll circle back to that at the end. But yeah, so what I prepared. So anyway, I just wanted to say thank you to Tuwumi and TCLI for having me here today. As Becky said, my name is Alicia Fowler, and I am honored to be part of today's discussion. Just a bit about who I am. I'm originally from Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, which is on Treaty 6 territory, and I now make my home in Edmonton, which is also on Treaty 6 territory. And I live here with my husband, and where we are raising our 2 daughters. I do acknowledge that I'm a guest on Treaty 6 lands, a traditional home to many Indigenous people and nations, and I'm grateful to be here. Just to be transparent about my role today on the panel, Unlike Becky, I've never formally studied anything on this topic that we're discussing, and I'm by no means an expert. I am here to share my own lived experiences with the gender gap, and I'm also here to learn from everyone else. So thank you for that. What does the gender gap mean to me? So for me, the gender gap does feel like a very real experience as a professional female. My work background is I'm a CPA CA, and I hold a master's in professional accounting. And I have worked for a number of big and small firms. As I've progressed through my career, it's become very obvious, unfortunately, that there are significant barriers that women face as they aspire for positions, particularly in leadership, as Yemi had mentioned in his discussion. Growing up, I was raised by very strong matriarchs. Women ran the households, they raised children, they managed finances, and they also worked outside of the home. So this was something very normal to me and my family. But I did learn very early on that caring for others, even before myself, was expected of women and girls. I'd say the pandemic particularly has highlighted all sorts of gaps and barriers, including the gender gap for a lot of women, and myself included. So a lot that I'm reading about this topic point to women being most impacted over men, as they are more often in frontline positions, as Yemi had mentioned. They're doing more care, like they do more work in terms of caring for vulnerable populations, more frontline service work, these sorts of things. Professional women are impacted as they've been asked by their families and their work to give more of themselves. Many, like myself, were forced to make decisions between work and caring for family when the pandemic hit. And more often than not, caring for family wins. But where does that leave us in the workplace? Honestly, it leaves us behind our male counterparts, and it leaves us stretched thinner than we've ever felt before. We're stretched more mentally, financially, emotionally, and physically as well. So my experience during the pandemic was I left my full-time job as a manager at an accounting firm to stay home and care for my 2 daughters. When that happened, I listened to the women around me as their responsibilities mounted, and they felt their opportunities were slipping away. I saw this as an opportunity to make small changes for myself and the women around me. So I'm actually in the process, oh, here's my daughter, of registering a women-led accounting firm to support women entrepreneurs and businesses making social impact. I see opportunity to train women to develop different skills like accounting, bookkeeping, tax skills, while at the same time as managing their home responsibilities. I see this as an opportunity to support women-led businesses that would not typically get the kind of service that they relate with from men. And finally, I see opportunity to bring feelings to decision-making tables because they matter, and to let go of competition and focus on collaboration, which are not typical aspects of the business work that I've been doing. So I'm not sure where we go from here. As a woman, I do try to support other women as much as I can. I do think we have a long way to go. Sorry about my daughter, but I think we do need to get there together, women for women and men for women as well. And then let me get back to you, Becky, on the economic angle. I do need to think about that one.
That's totally fine. And I think I would throw the question open to the panelists. Thank you so much. You said something. We need to begin to think competition, collaboration, not competition. We need to begin to look at how best we can support women. How do you manage the home and be a professional? I mean, I got asked that question today too. Someone said, I am not sure how you do it. I mean, I work full-time. I do this work also with the nonprofits as part-time, and I am also a full-time mom. So how do we do it? Yeah, but that also kind of brings us to the question I asked before that I said, should women, by reason of all these, be made to work certain roles because of their physique and physiology and social, considering social and cultural beliefs and practices, and the same likewise for men? I mean, I just throw it open to any of the panelists. Okay, Christian.
Hi, I'm not familiar with Zoom as much. I don't know if there's a way to raise your hand or in the form
Okay,
maybe.
yeah.
It's okay.
One of the interesting things as I've been realizing, and I'm growing all the time, was how important it is to have a diverse voice in a room. The reason, and I actually learned this from a wonderful interview with Tina Fey, who's a comedian and she's an actor in the US. And she talked about how a lot of scripts on Saturday Night Live were being ignored and not valued because there weren't women in the room to say, hey, that's actually good. I get that. When it was a room full of men, they would miss opportunities. And that's what I really started to open up my mind, how important that representation, and not the representation that I agree with, how important it is to have the representation I don't agree with or I don't understand to be in that room. Because I think the more minds that are in that space, the more likely we're able to answer questions like that with more sense. I think the women who have joined the military have proven they're very valuable and very effective and can do the work as any other male soldier. The women who are in the police force or in the fire department bring opportunities and options. On top of that, I think diversity is key. You have people from different viewpoints, from different places that they grew up. They're going to bring things that if you don't see it, you can't see it. I think that's the problem when we talked about privilege before. It's blinding. You don't see your privilege. It's others who tend to see it. And it's, or unless if it's gone, then all of a sudden you see it. But having other voices in other places, other people in those positions, I think can help us understand how we make those differences in our economy. And that's going to be a real challenge because I think there's a ceiling where we've seen progress in this area, particularly when we talk about the highest paid CEOs, the people who are making the largest economic decisions. There's less women representative. I'm happy to see that there are more women represented in government, but we need more. And not because of affirmative action or because that's fair and right. That's because we're not going to figure out what we don't know or how we can get better unless we have representation. So I think for one, figuring out where people need to be and how, we need people there to observe it freely in order to make that decision.
All right, thank you so much. That is a good point, a very interesting and important point to note. I really like the angle you always come from, Christian. It makes it kind of makes one pause and think and kind of say, okay, I have this point of view, but this is another perspective that is equally deep. And some of the things you've been saying this afternoon requires one to go step back and take a deep thought and really think about it. And I know that for days to come, all I'll be thinking about are the aspect of men being very important in the conversation for gender gap too, how they're hurting. And I know that that's going to be that's going to be ringing in my head in days to come. So Yemi, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, but I think Clinton wanted to say something first before me. Or
pointing out how to hand.
Can I go before you, Clinton, or you go first?
No, go ahead. I actually was just trying to point out how you can raise your hand on Zoom. I didn't really have anything prepared, so
yeah.
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah. Pardon me, I've got a bit of fright when talking to people. So I'll just do a brief introduction of myself. My name is Abayomi Ogayemi. You can call me Yomi. I'm a licensed lawyer in Ontario. I practice immigration law, family law, and a bit of business law too. And when we talk about that concept of equality, it becomes problematic. Like, oh, how can I pair like an orange to a banana? Like, these two things are not the same thing. So like, don't let us like compare this thing together, strictly speaking. And sometimes when I think about equality, you can't treat on equals equally and get justice, and at the same time too, you can't treat equals too on equally. That might bring in justice too. So like, from this point, we are like saying that these two people are kind of different, or are we saying like women are unequal from what we are saying, and we now need to treat them equally? So that notion of equality becomes a problem. So like, let's say for example, taking care of children, there's no matter how a father so much loves the kid will still want to be breastfed by the mom. So sometimes during this lockdown, a lot of family have been facing the problems, like when they just say, oh, go and meet your mom. Like, oh, the mom got the solution to all the problems. So that too is a kind of cultural problems too. So but we should not forget, despite all this, we must still look at that consensus, bridging the gap. One way I feel like we can bridge the gap is, regardless of the sex, there should be a policy demanding equal payday. So that's the first one. Second one, cultural changes. Okay, I would use Nigeria as an example. Like, I come from the southwest part of Nigeria, and there was a day I went to the southeastern part, and I've never seen women so industrious like that in my life. Women were going to farms with wheelbarrows and everything. And where I come from, women are like all dressed up, like um dressed up. Their family provides everything for them. They don't do such a kind of ethic labor, and going to say to a different location in the country sheds a lot of cultural shock. Like, oh, so women can do this. And looking at the cultural change too, and political change, I think for politics, government itself should get more policies done, because this is not just for men. Both men and women are voters too. So it's much, there must be a lot of collaboration. And there's a problem with the pending support caregiving structure. It tends to place so much burden on the females, or let's say on the mothers, because the policy sick leave now, it's becoming a lot of burden on women, because when most times when they said, oh, please, your child can't come to school, your child has to stay back for 14 days, what the woman, she's just thinking is, how can I tell this man not to go out for his job and stay with the kid? And the woman too is trying to say like, oh, please, I can't do this by myself. And during this pandemic, it has been a lot of problems. A lot of families are being broken. Like, divorce rate is skyrocketing. Like these are factual talks. Most people can say on social media. There's a lot of domestic violence, like, oh, people try to force their roles on themselves, like, oh, you need to do this, you need to
I do, yeah, I do
do.
understand. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry to cut you off, but we have to kind of move on a
Okay,
little
cool.
bit because what you were talking about is actually, when you say it's factual, I agree, because a lot of studies that are coming out from several countries are saying, especially even in China, where the Chinese government was kind of like happy that couples are staying together. They had a study that came out once and said there was actually more diverse. People are beginning to see their spouses and partners for the first time for who they really are. And yeah, so there are also professionals around the world have been talking about the other public health issues that are arising from the lockdown. And also, before we go ahead, I also just want to say that there was an article I read that talked about how we can accommodate women, working women, in the pandemic. He was talking about the government and also organizations need to begin to realize that women can work. And so they can give them some flexibility. Maybe if you work 8 to 5 or 8 to 4, you can work between the hours of 8 and 9 p.m. in between which time you can drop, do your school runs, or take care of your kid, put them to bed, come back in the evening and continue your work. So I also want to mention here that when we talk about gender, before we make cultural changes to the society, we have to be careful, because some of these cultures have been around for a while, so it might not be easily accepted. And also, what is important is not so much as having a man take over the care of a child, as having a man and a woman have equal access to opportunities. So do not stop a woman from becoming the CEO because she's a woman, but simply because maybe she didn't qualify, as well as the man. So it is not, there are several women I know, myself included, I would not want to hand over taking care of my kids to my husband, not because he cannot, but because it is my pride and joy. It is something I do because I love my home. So every home has to do what works for them. The society shouldn't put pressure on you as a woman to take care of your child. You should see that, oh, I love my family, I love my home, I love my kids, I love my husband, and this is what I really want to do. And because I really don't want to, Alicia does not have to choose between her job and taking care of her daughters. She has to go home, take care of them, and have the opportunity to do her job. So access to equal opportunities. And also, couples and families should begin to do what works for them. It doesn't make sense for the woman who is earning, say, $10,000 a month to resign from her job and take care of the home, where the man is earning 3, maybe 4, or it maybe he's on benefit or something. So people should begin to use common sense to do what works for them. And so these are just my thoughts, and I would like to hear what anyone has to say about it, because I believe it is access to opportunities, opportunity for career advancement, opportunities for education, opportunities for political opportunities. So what do we have to say about this? Because this is a conversation I've had with Tomi before, and we kind of had a healthy conversation about it, that it is not so much about it is a man or a woman as it is about access, equal access to opportunity. What do we have to say about that? So the floor is open. Yeah, Alicia, you want to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to, say something super quick about this issue. And I do think like we as parents have a really big responsibility in conditioning our children to support them through being equal players, when it comes to their time to be running households as well. They know, like, I have 2 daughters, I don't have sons, but we work hard to teach them about caring and nurturing, which I think is a very traditional, this is what girls do, this is how women operate in the world. But we're also working very hard to try and bust down barriers for them, to participate in what, like I refer to as blue jobs and pink jobs in our home. Like when it comes to fixing the car, I didn't get that opportunity as a little girl to learn how to do that, but we're working hard within our home to teach our daughters that that's something that isn't a man job or a woman job. That's like everyone learns how to do that, right? So anyway.
Does anybody have something to say? Maybe someone that hasn't spoken today at all before? Or any of the panelists? So we are talking about what we want to focus. We are talking about, do we create stereotypes or do we break down barriers? Now we've agreed, I think from all we've said, that we need to break down barriers instead of creating stereotypes, because that is not healthy. And we need to ensure there are equal access to opportunities. The girls should have opportunities to learn how to fix the car. The boys should have opportunities to learn how to cook. And, you know, sometimes I like watching this program, Food Network, and I'm always like excited because I believe over the years I've been watching that program, I've seen more male chefs, more male cooks than female cooks. And I was pretty surprised because that was one career I had kind of attributed to women. But over the years, I even see more chefs than women, male chefs than women chefs. So breaking down, I believe that over the years, we might have been breaking down barriers. So there might actually be need for a research to be done to see where are we now when we started having the conversations and where do we need to be. So which brings us to the next question. What do we like to see in the near future in terms of gender roles for economic, political, and maybe I would just let Christian speak to this too. What do we want to see? Where do we think we need to be? And what would we consider the aha moment? We are there.
Wow. I hope we find that. I think that's what we're all striving for. I just going to backtrack and then come back to this because I think it's important. I work in an industry that's mostly managed by women. And my wife she's a nurse. She works in a hospital. So I'm at home. And the accommodations made to me were much more understanding by my employer because it was an environment in which women understood those roles and much more flexible. You're talking about those shifting hours and things, and I recognize that if it wasn't for that, my kids wouldn't have the kind of opportunities I'm able to offer them. I love the conversation about the blue jobs and pink jobs because those are things that happen in my home as well. My wife and I often have these wonderful conversations. I admire her so much. She's taught me so much about me as much as I hope I've taught her about herself. But one of the things I think it's really important it comes down to is I think whatever negotiation we choose, as long as it's been free choice and not imposed upon you. If I want to be a stay-at-home dad, I want that to be my choice rather than said you're not allowed to be or you have to be. And I think that's sort of where, again, we tend to stick on these little categories and hold on to them too long. And then we don't realize that the best way of doing this is give people the rights and freedoms to learn that. My second comment, and I think back to your initial question, is how do we get there and how are we going to see those changes? I think the role of what is masculinity and what is manhood is changing. And we need to continue to offer, I think, that idea of masculinity to be not one thing, but a spectrum. There are many masculine men and many feminine masculine men and everything in between. We're not the same people. And the more there's some flexibility, those sort of choices and opportunities can, I think, lead us to be fathers to our next generation, to give them the right to choose, that they don't have to follow my footsteps and be how I am. Now realize, again, I'm only speaking from my family, my culture, because in the end, each of us have to negotiate that from our lived experience and how much of that change we can make. But I think if we continue to be, again, men and women to be part of this change, because we've got to do this together. Otherwise, we're only working with half of the conversation. The more we are able to, I think, negotiate those things in our family, I think the more the possibilities of generations. And I wish it would be shorter, but I don't think realistically we're going to get there right away or faster than I think we want to. There's going to be pushback. I think Donald Trump's experience and what America's experience is the best example of that pushback. That doesn't mean we don't still fight to move forward, but we got to figure out those obstacles and discuss those differences in order to get there.
Thank you very much, Christian. So I'm just going to highlight some things we've talked about, then I would just throw the floor open for anybody to contribute to. So the question is, how do we bridge these gaps, these gender gaps? So we've mentioned we need collaboration, not competition. We need free choice. I should do this because I want to do this, not because I have been conditioned by society to do this. We need to see people, not gender, not just genders, not just, we need to see people as people and not just, oh, you're a man, you're a woman. We need to see them as people. We need to get men and women to be part of this. We need to, yeah, so that's very important, especially where it comes to making policies, because the government is always the important factor in all of this conversation. They need to be engaging the right stakeholders while as part of the decision and implementation, and as part of the monitoring and evaluation processes, just to see how far they've been. So there are more, do we have more suggestions on how we can really bridge this gap, this gender gap on both ends, whether on the man's side and the women's side? Do we have any more suggestions to add to this? Anybody? Okay. Okay, so that's fine. And so I'm glad we're having this conversation. And so like we have been discussing, we have been talking about the gender gap, on both sides. And do we agree that we need to bridge the gap? It's not just that women are underrepresented, but there are also issues that are affecting men. And then as part of this conversation, we have also discussed how it should be equal access. And we should begin to break down stereotypes that are preventing us from reaching our goal. And what the aha moment would look like would be when people are able to be who they want to be and not have to choose between all these and that and all of that. So this is a great conversation. It is, I wouldn't say conversation starter, I would say continuation of the conversation. And I also want to say that there is actually the need for us to find out where we are in terms of bridging the gap. Hello. And where are we? How far have we come? And also, I also want to address what Christian raised earlier about men. So we need to also remember that there are people that have histories that may not be feeling safe. So they should be part of the conversation. So everyone should be part of the conversation that we need to begin to have on how we can bridge a gap between men and women when it comes to politically, in education, in economic, in career roles, in gender roles and all of that. So yeah, Tomi, I'm going to hand the floor over to you. I believe we have 5 more minutes to go. Tomi, sorry. Okay. Oh yes, that's fine. Yeah, Christian, what you just said. Okay, and someone said something in chat that was all I can. It said, Kemi says, I can resonate with what Alicia just said. So breaking through stereotypes, break free of, or rather than buying them dolls, you buy them helicopter cars and all of that. Yeah, so if your daughter is interested in cars, buy her. She's not interested at all. Leave out the dolls. So it's choice, not because the society has conditioned you to do this and do that. So yeah, I don't know if Tomi is still on. I'm going to hand the floor over to her. I think we have just a few minutes left of the conversation. Over to you, Tomi. Okay. I hope you can hear me, everyone.
Yep.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering, maybe Towumi is having some issues with her connection. So it was nice. What do you guys think about the conversation? Where do we take it from here? Yeah, I think we should just answer that. I'll just ask everyone, Clinton, what do we do next? Where do we go from here?
Sure. I mean, it's obviously like you guys have been saying before, we definitely need to communicate more. We need to start looking at both genders. We got to start getting rid of the stereotype. But I mean, I believe there's a lot of loopholes. There's a lot of gaps in the legal system, you know, when it comes to marriages and divorces and child sharing custody with children. You know, other types of laws that kind of favor one gender over the other. I mean, I'm not saying, you know, there's like a huge problem there, but there is something that I think it does need to be, you know, revamped, looked over. But I also think the economy plays a big role in it too, because I mean, today's, you know, the cost of living has gone up so much, and I mean, you can't just like getting a job or, you know, going to college and getting a career, stuff like that. Today I've been noticing a lot of like families, you know, you can't just live on one income to survive. Both people are needing now to get a jobs to, you know, have enough money to have a nice healthy home. But I mean, then again, you're not raising your children, you're sending them off to childcare. So I mean, those are some key areas that I have been thinking about. Obviously, I don't know the answers to them, but I definitely think those are some areas to start. Is, I mean, I'm not sure if we can fix the economy or how we can help it or anything like that, but I definitely see those as key points that need attention. So that's kind of all I had for now.
All right, thank you. And Alicia, I see your hand.
Yeah, I had mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, I think it's really fantastic that there are men on the panel. I've been part of these discussions before, and they're typically women-led and women-run, and the male voice is missing, and the male, I guess, ears are missing from those conversations as well. So I thank you to Towumi, and also to the three men on the panel who joined us. And I think that's an important way to bridge this gap and moving forward, is having you listen and having us listen to your perspective and working together, rather than just women trying to lead this charge and not getting anywhere.
All right, thank you so much. And any final thoughts, Christian Ogayemi, sorry.
This is a lifelong work for me. I do my best to offer support for men, one man at a time or one small group at a time. And it's amazing the conversations men can have when the right environment is offered. I want the women who work so hard for this change to know that there's hope. But we got to create more possibilities, more opportunities for these discussions to occur within the male community as well. One of the biggest challenges I often see is that not all men want to have this talk. They're often too entrenched in that pain to be able to even consider another lens. But that's not the majority of men, it's just the loudest. The majority of men are everyday human beings who are trying to do their best with what they have, and given an opportunity, can make a huge change. But we need to continue to offer those opportunities for that change to occur.
Thank you very much. And as put in the chat, teamwork makes the dream work. Small impact, big long-term impact. And someone once said, there's nothing wrong with the world. There's only something wrong with our glasses.
So just
thanks, everyone.
Thank you
Yeah,
very much.
Ogayemi, you wanted to say something?
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to say a big thank you from everybody, and this has been a great dialectic wisdom, getting from the women, the men, and everything. And I would say the more we're trying to bridge the gap, we should not forget the men too. So yeah.
Men's
Thank
life
you very
matter.
much.
Just kidding. All right, over to you, Tomi.
Sorry, 1 minute. Let me sign something.
We want to see your face, so Tommy.
Hi.
Hi.
So
Hi,
thanks
Michelle.
everyone. Thanks Becky, thanks Alicia, and thanks Amy, and thanks to all participants. I really do hope that everyone had a very insightful conversation, and I hope it was worth your time, and we just incorporate all of this learning really, and just work on all these gaps basically. Yeah. Thank you. Till next time, stay up to date. I'll also upload it on YouTube. Or it's
Everybody.
currently running live on Facebook. So if you want to check it there, that would
Okay.
also be good. Have a good evening. Bye.
Bye.